Again, I'm Chris, and I'll qualify for 15 to 20 minutes. It's really great being in this hall. This is 7 years ago where I first kind of stumbled in, and it's really nice being here. I've been away to college for about 5 years, and just twice a year I come back for like a week to visit winter break and summer break my parents in Danvers here. And I hit as many meetings as I can because I really love the AA in this area. We're just so blessed to have so many meetings. Out in Iowa, there was 5 meetings a week, and they don't do this where they share their stories. It's a round robin, and they just focus on daily reflections or something like that. But so I just love hitting as many meetings as I can when I come back and seeing my friends like Dale. A little bit before was I grew up mostly in Danvers. My parents divorced when I was 3 or 4. My mother lived in various towns, and my parents had joint custody, which meant that I went to the Danvers school system, and then my father brought me to my mother's house every evening, and I didn't really have many friends because my mother moved around so much. I had an older brother who kind of tormented me growing up, to say the least. And I just spent a lot of time alone because I didn't want to spend time with him. And I ended up reading a lot of books and doing really well in school with that time. And from a very early age, I just wanted to do really well in school and get away from the situation that I was in. I wasn't a very happy child, and fast forwarding a little bit in high school, I remember something had changed. I became really depressed and had a lot of anxiety, and I didn't really know what was going on inside me, and my family, we didn't really talk about stuff like that, feelings and stuff, and it just kind of got worse without ever getting any help or anything. And I remember I started hanging out with a different bunch of guys from my school. I had moved towards fine arts and started hanging out with more of the kids that hung out in the art studio. And they kind of introduced me to drinking and drugging. And I had always had this idea in my mind that people who drank and drugged were losers. And, my brother and all his friends every night went out, and they were all in the medial classes, and I didn't want anything to do with them or be anything like them. And about a month after my first night of going out, I was hanging out with my brother and his friends, and I was keeping up with the best of them. My story is really one of a very fast progression where it's just like, beer was never enough for me. Trying to drink a 12-pack of beer was not something that interested me. I wanted tequila or something like that right away, and I wanted that instant relief. And I didn't know it existed, and then it was like magic to me. I drank really just to pass out. I wasn't social at all about my drinking. I just drank as much as I could, as fast as I could. And then a lot of times got dropped off in front of my house and was left alone to stumble inside. And I can remember just crawling up the stairs as quietly as possible, trying not to wake up my parents. But, so that was towards the end of my sophomore or the beginning of my junior year. I barely remember. But I went from being a straight A student to being in summer school that year. So losses of value and interests definitely went out the window very quickly. And the following year, I could barely make it to school. I had so many absences that I had to. The assistant principal said he didn't know what to do with me because I had done so well up until that junior year, and he said, obviously something's going on outside of school, but if you can just make it to class every day, we'll let you graduate. You only need to pass one class this year, and you can do that in summer school. So we'll let you graduate if you just show up. And that was like a month or two before graduation. And within a week, I showed up to school drunk, and I was out all night drinking. And in my head, in my drunk mind, all I could think of, I need to get to school so I can graduate, and I'll just fall asleep there. But I hit 2 cars in the parking lot, and I was also on a bunch of pills, and I don't know what else I did that day. But I ended up in the hospital. I guess I had passed out and couldn't be revived, and I woke up in the hospital. And that was my first real jackpot, was waking up in the hospital, seeing my parents looking at me, completely devastated, what had happened to this straight-A student son. I was the one that they never worried about, and here I was, they thought, I was called to the hospital, and here I am. And I just remember slamming my head against the back of the bed, and I couldn't believe what was going on. And I got a OUI for that, and I cleaned up a little bit for a little while. Kind of scared me, and I just wanted all the problems to go away. And being on probation, helped me not do the dry goods. But, I wasn't getting tested for alcohol. I was only 17 years old at that point, and once a month drug tests. So, I felt like drinking was okay, and drinking led to other things. And basically, my early 20s was kind of this on again, off again, where I would either, it was like this cycle of getting in and out of trouble. And when I got into trouble, things would, I would stop and try and get my life together. And I would do really good, make a lot of gains, and then start to feel like, I'm a grown up, I can drink once in a while. And it always ended up spiraling out of control rather quickly. And then I got into a relationship with a girl who could drink a couple glasses of wine every night. She was Italian, and her parents were very Italian, and they drank wine at dinner. And, this for me was a disastrous situation, because I saw her doing this, and I didn't think of myself as an alcoholic. I thought of myself as someone who could easily get themselves into trouble. But I didn't realize that allergy that I come to realize now, that I've been taught in these halls about. And, within a month I was drinking 2 bottles of wine, and she was still drinking 2 glasses of wine. And, from there it just got worse and worse and worse. I just very quickly started drinking whiskey, and, she had no idea what she was dealing with me. And she introduced me to drinking a beer in the morning when I was hungover. But, I quickly learned that if I drank a beer in the morning, I need to drink another beer, and then another beer, and I drank all day. I could not stop. I just could not stop. And, this daily drinking, it was incredible. The hiding, and, it's funny because as I think of my story, I can relate to so many other stories that I've heard in these halls. I would go to the Cappies on, this Cappy's over here in the morning, and then after work I'd go to that Cappy's, and, they would both see me every day, but I thought because they only saw me once a day, they wouldn't think that I was an alcoholic. And, and then when I started going more than twice a day, I started going to Merchants, and, I had to go to 3 different places every day just to get enough alcohol for me. And because I couldn't get too much all at once while I had to work, because I would just drink it all. And I knew that if I bought too much in the morning, that I would pass out at work, or too much at lunchtime, pass out. And then, so basically I felt like all day I was just kind of waiting till I could drink like I wanted to, which was just to drink and pass out after work. And I got really sick. In the mornings, I would always feel like, I must have just drank 1 too many last night. And I would wake up and I would dry heave. Sometimes I would throw up blood or bile. And the little trick that I learned was to leave some alcohol in my truck because I would get too drunk to walk out to my truck. And I needed something before I could leave the house. And so after I crawled into the bathroom, I'd crawl outside to my truck, and that was my life, and it was a living hell. And I was only 24, 25 years old, and I just saw myself going to an eventual death. I didn't want to kill myself, but I wanted to die, and I was just kind of praying every day that drinking and driving, I would crash and die. And, it's kind of like this idea in my head that never really got well developed. But I did eventually crash and got my second OUI. I had one of those days where I did get too much alcohol in the morning, and alcohol started to do different things to me. I would black out unexpectedly, and this is what happened at work. Was I blacked out unexpectedly on less and less alcohol, and got sent home. And at 11 o'clock in the morning on 128, I totaled my truck, and I think I shut down the highway, from what I've been told. Some people remember it, and I don't. And I was very fortunate. I just got bruised and scraped up, but my truck got completely totaled, and they had to cut the top of it off to get me out and all that stuff. So here I was at 26 years old in the same exact situation as high school, with my parents looking at me, with me waking up in the hospital. And, they were willing to look their head the other way, everyone in my life that I hadn't pushed away, and not see just how much I was drinking until that point. At that point, not only did I have to face up to the reality and be open about what I was doing, but everyone around me who didn't want to see it and was happy enough that I was trying to hide it now also had to talk to me about it. And my family had one of those interventions where I just kind of sat there and couldn't do anything except for hang my head. And I remember I promised my mother I wasn't going to drink for a year, because, if I stopped drinking for a year, in my mind, not knowing anything, then I must be cured, and then I could drink on the weekends like a normal person. And I remember her being very upset with me about that, and I was just obsessing about the next drink, basically. And I didn't know that at that time, because that's all I could think about is, a year will go by, and then I can drink again. And that's what kind of, took my mindset for a while. But knowing that I was going to get sent here by the courts, I wanted to come in early so I wouldn't have to come in and just get my court slip signed, because I had this huge ego and pride, and I didn't want to come in right away and just only have that. And I found out this meeting was just a minute from my house. I came and I sat and I watched, and it took me a long time to really be able to hear the people in here. I knew people stayed sober and that there was a 12 steps of recovery, and I took that in a different way. I thought if I did these 12 steps, I would recover and be healed. And so I was probably the most willing person to do the steps that has ever come through here. I thought if I do these steps, I can get out of here, and then I'll be, healed of my problem. And a lot of people just, they point out in the book and everything where the steps were, but I didn't understand how that was going to relieve my alcoholism. I thought there was some medical treatment or something involved these 12 steps. But early sobriety was difficult. I lost my job, I lost my relationship, and it was also wonderful at the same time, because I lost my job and I lost the relationship I was in, and I could just focus on recovery for a while, and I could start going to lots of meetings, and I met a lot of really great people. And I met a guy in one of the meetings who told me to go to lots of meetings, and I said, what are all these meetings that you go to? And then he started going to a lot more meetings, driving me to all the meetings he suggested that I went to. And because I held everyone to the same. If they suggested it to me, I wanted to know when they were doing this, and if they were doing it, then I would do it as well. But if they suggested it and they weren't doing it, then I wasn't going to do it. And some people have told me it was really good for them. I'm sure I was really annoying to a lot of people, and I found out later that I was what's called an asshole, where I just walked around and I asked every single person in the room questions until I got to hear what I wanted to hear. And then that is how early sobriety worked for me until I got a sponsor. Because once I got a sponsor, I learned that I could just ask one person who actually knows my situation and I trust, and then I could think about what he said. And I stopped asking everyone. But early sobriety, for me, was important. I could tell, looking at the steps, that I needed to find a higher power, and I wasn't doing any business with God, and I was very mad at the world, mad at a God who I said I did not believe in. And I remember I did talk to a lot of people about how they found a higher power, and one lady who I haven't seen here in many, many years, she told me to look at my expectations about God and my higher power, and maybe just become open to something that I don't know. And I kind of went home that night, and that was it. Just becoming willing was all I really needed to do. And it's not like I found God or anything, but just that willingness was such a relief from the this self that I had, and this knowing that I didn't know, and stuff like that. But sobriety has been great for me. After a couple of years of coming to these halls, being a coffee maker in this meeting, and going on commitments with Topsfield. I can't say enough about doing those commitments, and getting in a group, just getting in the center of AA, sponsorship. I got a spiritual advisor who took me through the steps. It was a very beautiful thing that I'll remember my whole life. And just a lot of great things have happened to me because I just came to meetings and stayed. Like I said, I just finished up school, and because of what I learned in AA, as a high school dropout, I graduated magna cum laude with 2.5 degrees, and I have a full scholarship to a graduate program. And it's, the promises do come true. And, I just happened to remember the other day that I used to look through the book wanting to find out what these promises were. I wanted to be promised that I would have a new girlfriend, a great job, and all these things when I first came in here. And the promises came true, and I have all this great stuff in my life. But I don't have my license back yet, and I don't have an ideal or perfect relationship. But it's so good to be here. And thank you all for being here. And with that, I'll open the meeting, I guess. Oh, no.